Let me just quickly share my screen and we'll get cracking. Lovely stuff. Cool. So, yes, my name is Mr. Vavavoom, Thierry Ngutegure. So try and say that surname whilst you're sober. I am the head of insight over at Journey Further. And so my role there is to infuse and inspire data in everything that we do. And particularly today, I'm going to be taking you guys through a talk around brand. How do we talk about brand? I think when we look at organizations and companies now, you see a lot of the people who produce the creatives in one side and a lot of the people who are kind of trying to drive performance on another side. And we're all producing creative content to a degree within our own respective fields. But ultimately, sometimes some of the creatives that we produce might actually hinder both brand and performance or may benefit one or the other side. And so then this talk is just to show you guys a consideration as to when we are creating that type of content, we should be thinking holistically about long-term brand and also why that is important. And I'll take you through a couple of tools that I use, some quite lo-fi ones, some quite hi-fi ones, and do feel free to ping me over any questions. I've left my Twitter on there as well. So please do feel free to grab me at any point, or even if you enjoy my content, feel free to follow. So let's jump straight into this. So whenever we talk about brand, I feel like each department probably has its own definition, to be honest. But when we're talking about brand in this context, the way I'd like you guys to think about it is that it's a culmination of how people feel when they interact with you, ultimately. And this quote actually comes from my manager. No, I'm not trying to get a pay rise. He just happened to be quite insightful on this occasion. And with your brand, the causal link between business decisions and customer perception is more tenuous, more unpredictable, and often in the reverse. So ultimately, what we think we're doing is we are creating said content from a business decision perspective, thinking, that will drive our customer perception. But actually, sometimes it can work in reverse. So understanding exactly who our customer is, thinks and feels, or even learning from past campaigns in order to kind of drive that decision making is a really great way as well of thinking about brand. Now, let's take a typical SEO. So let's take myself a couple of years back. So how I would think. So I'd create decent content. I'd build a sugar ton of relevant links, keyword relevant there, specifically from our last talk just before myself. And so ultimately you'd be thinking, right, so Google, I've done everything you want, right? Right. What am I missing? And it's brands. They're a safe bet. They're trusted. Although I'm actually a Google Pixel person, we'll take Apple as trusted for now. And they're what people expect to see, which definitely was not this case. And the reason brand to me stands out as the focal point is because it's unlike other strategies, brand lives throughout the entire customer journey. So everywhere from people becoming aware of you, considering to purchase, the kind of conversion cycle, retention, and even advocacy. So people actually promoting your brand, word of mouth, recommendations, trust pilots, the lot. Brand actually stems throughout that entire process. So ultimately, what we're talking about here when we're talking about, making sure that we consider brand in our kind of SEO strategy is that we're trying to drive sales overnight, so the performance aspect of stuff, but also grow brand over time and protect that. So that kind of branding team as well, and bringing in those two worlds together. Now, you don't need any fancy tools or a massive brand to kind of start tracking. As I said, I will, go through some some lo-fi, some quite hi-fi tools as well. But yeah, ultimately, you don't need anything big budget, etc., to get tracking. So a really, really kind of lo-fi way of doing this as well is just thinking about your kind of brand modifiers. There's a talk by Simon from Blue Array, which is really, really good, where he talks about these brand modifiers that might be worth having a look into. But ultimately, this is understanding what your brand is actually, the words that are associated with your brand. And when people think about your brand, what is it that they place next to it? What is that modifier? So recently I was having a little look at buying some new trainers. And so then here I was looking at the sole supplier. And ultimately I was looking for, size guide, Jordan 1s, return policies, etc. Now, if this isn't, content they currently have on site, it's a really good indicative way of being able to get, to gauge what your audience actually expects you to produce and what that, what they associate with you as a brand. So Soul Supply and Jordan 1s is a really good example here, where if they didn't sell Jordan 1s, I believe, has like 12 million monthly searches, which is just incredible. But if they didn't, sell those as a trainer provider, that really is a great indicator as to my audience expects me to have these things as a brand. And so therefore, from a performance perspective, I should therefore be catering for that need, as well as the return policies and science guides. But that's a really nice way of of kind of understanding your brand association. Some really key, tool recommendations as well. So keyword insights and Systrix can help you kind of do that. There are other tools as well. So pretty much any kind of keyword aggregator or search volume analyzer will be able to support you to do that. We also built our own bespoke tool in order for us to take it a little bit of a level up. So it's called Salient. We actually have a free some free credits on this. So if you take a little screenshot of that URL there and have a little look later, what you have the ability to do is, although we can understand that brand plus keyword modifier, the thing that was missing in terms of understanding our brand from a search perspective was sentiment. Like how do I build that in? And so then this is where we built Salient, which uses the same kind of natural language kind of processing that Google does. And it will help you understand not only, what keywords you're actually relevant for around your brand, but also what that sentiment is around that brand as well. And so for context here as well, in terms of like producing content that is super relevant towards your brand, you have the ability to contrast and compare coverage. So take these two pieces of coverage, for example. So one has a DR or DA, depending on which way you're inclined, of 91, one of 47. So from a search perspective and a performance perspective, we're like, stop right there. It's a no-brainer that we would ultimately go for the timeout. But from a brand perspective and being relevant and being, what your audience actually expects you to produce, is that the case? Because if then you look at the categories for those pieces of coverage, one of them is, talks about, so timeout, family, parenting, babies and toddlers. Whereas the other one is actually automotive vehicles, bicycles. So that is far more relevant for a cycle brand than it would be in terms of family and parenting content. And so you can see there's a real juxtaposition here between what performance says versus what actual relevancy says and what your audience expects to hear from you and how that relevancy is scored. So give that a go. It's, as I say, it's got some free credits on there, and it's a really great way of understanding that. Now, why do we track brands? So it's a great indication of brand awareness. So brand awareness from a aspect as well of growing market share. So it's a really, really great way of understanding that. Customers are typically further down the funnel. So once people are kind of have that brand advocacy and brand loyalty, you can assume that they are more likely to convert. It helps measure the success of your link building strategy. So ultimately building brand builds brand awareness. And especially when we're producing a lot of those creative campaigns, not only are we trying to get links, but we're also trying to build brand ultimately. And Google already understands this and expects us to match this intent, exactly as I've just kind of touched on. Now, but if you do have the pennies, I'm just going to take you through a couple of case studies. Now, I want to caveat that I've picked on a few brands, and it's not being me being mean in any way, shape, or form. It's just to show this on a real macro level as to why we should be considering brand in our kind of performance and SEO strategies. And once again, it goes back to it's how people feel when they interact with you. So a great way of doing this, Proqual, this is a really cool tool. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to take 5 to 10 creative assets and query them against an audience across 16 metrics. So this is a really great way of like pre-campaign testing and understanding of the campaign that we're trying to get off the ground and what we're trying to say as a brand. Does that match up with what our audience actually understands of that creative that we're producing? And then you have the ability to track those types of brand health metrics in line with creative over time. It's a really, really, really great way of kind of also, if you do have those kind of tough conversations where, the CMO says or the CEO says, I want to lead with this, then it's a really great way from a data-led perspective of saying, actually, this will perform while still having that creative freedom and lens on it. Another tool we use as well is YouGov. So a couple of you may have come across YouGov from an audience insight perspective. So this is like surveys and, to be honest, predominantly surveys. But they have some really nice bespoke tools because they have such a large kind of audience base. They have a tool called YouGov Brand Index in particular. Now, this tracks 16 brand metrics over 20,000 brands, and they have the ability to query approximately 300,000 Brits weekly, which is brilliant. And so then it gives us the ability on a daily basis, going back sometimes like 7 years for some brands, across media metrics, brand metrics, and lower funnel. So media being, are you aware of this brand? Buzz is a really good one as well from a news perspective. So this asks, in the last 2 weeks, have you heard anything positive or negative about this brand? within the news. So it's a really great way as well of being able to track the sentiment around any news coverage that you've got. Then you've got the brand health, so general impression of the brand. Quality, do you think that, that whatever they're selling is of good quality, good value for money? Would you work for them from that corporate reputation perspective, as well as the lower funnel metrics around purchase consideration and whether you're satisfied with that product? So let's look at this example then. So this was a little while ago. H&M put this product out. And from a search perspective, so this is where I'm bringing the two worlds together, right? So search and brand. So from a search perspective, you think, right, we're getting a lot of high idea links to this product page. Fantastic. It's exactly what we're looking for. Lots of social engagement and also a lot of traffic. I've just perceived that from the fact that we're getting loads of links, right? So we're getting a lot of traffic. So if I'm sat on one side of the mirror, I'm thinking this is an absolutely brilliant opportunity. But what they quickly didn't actually notice was they'd put this young black lad in a jumper that said coolest monkey in the jungle. And the press had actually picked it up and linked to that product page from an extremely negative position. And so then what they saw here was a 24% decline in brand impression. Now, this is where, as I say, from an SEO perspective, spot on. But from a brand perspective and long-term brand building of how people think and feel about us, this was extremely negative. But there's a couple of learnings that they can take from this. So what's great is we know there's 24% brand, decline. We can map the center point. Oh, no, spoiler alert. We can map the center point and say, okay, well, when we put a marketing statement out, what impact did that have? Then we can take any learnings. Has this happened before? And when it did happen, what was the recovery period? So what period, how long did it take for us to return back to zero or baseline, as it were? And so then this is where we can start to learn about how our, creative and kind of SEO efforts that are, audience and front facing can have an impact on our long-term brand. And therefore, how can we safeguard that position going forward? And a really great example is I'm a big fan of Love Island. It's my not so guilty pleasure. I will definitely be watching it tonight. But Misguided sponsored Love Island a couple of years ago, and they'd seen an increase in sales due to that collaboration. It was the most tweeted show of 2018. 3.7 million people watched it, and it's an absolutely brilliant brand synergy between the show's audience and the brand's audience as well. So then, what we're trying to look at there is then how do I prove that? Outside of sales, how do I prove that the brand and the audience are kind of run in tandem? So then what I did here was I looked at the brand impression versus ad awareness of Misguided. So I'm looking here at 18 to 24-year-old, particularly females who have an over-indexation for social consumption. And so then what I'm looking for here then is, was there a correlation between what we thought about the brand and what they saw? And so you can see here there was quite a strong correlation in ad awareness, so being aware of those ads during the period of Love Island, and an increase in brand impression. Now that decline on the far right hand side there is when they got sued by Kim Kardashian. So if anything, don't mess with Kim K. And then what about the impact of the lower funnel metrics, right? So I had a little look at the Just Eat. Just Eat have really kind of upped their game with this collaboration. So this is a collaboration with Love Island. And so then I wanted to really understand, like, brilliant. So you're doing all this above the line activity, a lot of creative, it's all kind of out there, but what is that actually driving? And so, yes, we saw a 0.6% increase in brand awareness and a 6% increase in ad awareness. But what does that actually convert to? And looking at the numbers during that period of time, it gave them a 9.4% increase in purchase intent, which is absolutely phenomenal, and probably why they continued to sponsor Love Island, because there was a real synergy in Love Island and their audience, as well as the kind of content that they were creating. Now, more recently, I did this piece. I've literally added this slide in the last 2 days, which is really cool. So I did a piece on the eBay and Love Island synergy, because when I looked at that synergy, to begin with, on the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see I use BuzzSumo. So this helps me look at the sentiment around media that has been published around both eBay and Love Island. And at the beginning, there's a really good partnership, in my opinion. So, ditching the fast fashion narrative, Love Island now are going to a kind of pre-loved or, circular economy way of talking about fashion. Amazing. And so then I thought there'll be a real synergy against their audience. And now if you look at year on year, the numbers on the left-hand side, there is some really good uplift seen. But then when you look straight in the middle from a search perspective, there wasn't really an increase in all variations around searches for eBay during that period in time. They just didn't seem to be, although people thought, oh, this is absolutely amazing, it seemed that the news actually benefited Love Island more so than it did eBay. And so then the query I'm trying to answer at the moment then is, should they have aligned their audience more so with a Depop, right? So Depop being very much around that generation. And also you have the ability to physically shop the look and it's all about fashion as opposed to eBay. Maybe, the audience is far too vast for them to have that synergy. So this was a really great way of analyzing as well, collaborations and looking at the success of that. Another example as well. So this Charlotte Tilbury. So she actually came out recently and faced a little bit of backlash, but from a search perspective, Charlotte Tilbury was getting a lot of coverage, a lot of links, and a lot of traffic. But when I actually delved into it, it turned out that she'd actually sparked some backlash online after claiming that the secret to keeping her marriage alive was actually never letting her husband see her with makeup on. And so this clearly didn't really align with her audience because not only was there a decrease in news sentiment, but there's also a decrease in purchase intent, as well as brand impression overall. So yeah, once again, it's keeping an eye on what impact that news has outside of the world of search. Another one I did quite a while ago as well. So Christmas dinner. So this is a really great lesson in combining metrics for a wider picture. I do apologize. This graph is absolutely awful. I did it. I am the perpetrator of said mistake, and it will become better, I promise. But what it's trying to get across here is the bottom green and red lines are social sentiment. So at the time we released a Christmas dinner, the team game at the time said, actually, I think we should pull this product this campaign, because we seem to be getting a lot of negative social backlash from this. And so then what I was trying to prove to them is there's a faint line in the background, which is increasing referral domains. So we're getting a lot of links to a relevant a category page. And at the same time, we saw an uplift in brand impression for their audience. So this is customers of, as well as actually Nat Rep at the time as well. And so then what we're able to do is go back to the team and say, actually, we think we should double down actually on this campaign, because not only are we benefiting from a search perspective, but also safeguarding from a brand perspective too. And ultimately, I'm not going to lie to you, who is going to look at that Christmas dinner there and not tweet something witty and a bit gross? But yeah, it's a really great way as well of safeguarding some creative campaigns when at the first instance, it may seem negative. Another example. So this was a really cool one, actually. Off on the face of it, the team at, I believe it was PLT at the time, got a DA90 link from the Huffington Post to a product category page, a product page. Absolutely brilliant, right? Now, what we didn't realize actually was what had happened is they had released a product that was, so a bikini that was for poolside posing only. So you couldn't actually go into the swimming pool with this bikini. Now, a young lady went into a swimming pool and the dive ran and it stained her skin blue, and hence the media coverage. But once again, from a search perspective, absolutely brilliant, right? And so then we need to put that into context, because also, yes, I'm telling you, 2% increase, 3% decline, but what is that in the realm of everything that's happening? So in the top right-hand corner, ASOS did a collaboration, which was quite cool. So a girl spilt red wine on herself at York races in her white jumpsuit, and she tweeted it. ASOS then contacted her, created some user-generated content with her, and she actually released a line of tie-dye products with them, right? And that saw a 400% increase in brand impression during that window of activity and that content being pushed. Now, then that gives our poolside posing only content some context, because they saw almost a 600% decline in their brand impression during that time. And we saw the decline for the Kim Kardashian earlier on. That was 98%. And so then we can start to benchmark certain activity as well and say, well, what is negative in the realm of negative in terms of our creative campaigns and our search strategies, our client, our audience facing. And the misguided £1 bikini, that was an interesting one as well. They released a product that was a £1 bikini, saw a lot of negative social backlash, but I just was really interested to see what that actually translated to in terms of brand, because the way I thought about that audience was, yeah, they're really, sustainably focused and want a circular economy, etc. But what this actually told me about the audience is the size of the negative conversations on social was nowhere near the size of the negative connotations to the brand impression, consideration to purchase. It actually barely really shifted it during that period of time. And so then ultimately what that taught me about that audience is that, yes, they're super sustainably conscious, But when it comes to a Thursday and I need an outfit for bottomless brunch on a Saturday, we're not, green one keen sometimes. And so then to wrap that up, don't build links or create campaigns just because it benefits search. We need to be thinking about brand. And it's a culmination of how people feel when they interact with us and not just search. And that is Mr. Vavavoom. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Thierry. Incredibly insightful. Love that you mentioned that search needs context, and the Pretty Little Thing and H&M examples are absolutely fantastic. If anyone has any questions, please click the reaction button and raise a hand. I'll kick things off, Thierry. I appreciate you sharing some of your insight tools, some of your secret sauce that you look at, your Systrix, your keyword insights. I'm definitely going to have a look at Salient to understand the natural tone of voice. I just want to talk quickly on measurement in campaign. You mentioned ProQuote and YouGov, and I was wondering if you had an opinion on the opportunity cost of over investing in things like ProQuote and YouGov versus the speed to market of a particular message. I was just wondering what your opinion is on that.
Yeah. So, you see, the thing is as well with that is I actually think when we're talking about speed to market, it should always already be built into our strategies. Because ultimately, if I want to run a campaign like this previously, or I'm marketing to as we say, a hard to market sector, then I need proof in the pudding almost, right? So I need to be able to convey to stakeholders that this thing was successful, that you took a risk on. And so then it should already be built into your strategy, that kind of measurement. What are we setting out to do? What are your objectives? What are your KPI? And how did you perform against that? So I do believe that you shouldn't throw money against the wall and see what kind of sticks. I do think there is some tactics towards it. So for this context, those brands I was talking about, they occupy, upwards of 15 to 20% nat rep brand awareness. So there's a lot of people that are aware of said brands. And so smaller brands don't need to be spending that money on YouGov. This is where they can be quite tactical and do, some really good in-depth keyword research, understanding what people are actually searching when they come to their site and what people associate with them, which is why I was like, check out Salient. Understand not only what Google thinks about you, but also do a little bit of research around what people think of you pre-post campaign. It's really, really insightful. I think it should always be built into a strategy.